Hey, what's up guys, it's Summer talking to you here. And in today's video, I will do an iPad lineup buyer's guide. This is my guide for you to buy an iPad in 2022. I know so much confusion with the release of the iPad 10, with the iPad Pro with the M2 chip, so much confusion. Keep in mind that this video is only talking about new iPads, although I will sprinkle some of my own recommendations there because I made a video, my last video talks about that. I do still think that the 2018 iPad Pro is the better deal, refurbished, because it's so cheap and so good that I think you should not pass on that. But if you do want a new iPad and you want to buy new from Apple, this video is for you. I will try to help you, try to choose and navigate the iPad lineup because it's very confusing, it's very big, and it's full of traps. So be careful, I will help you. Of course, I will talk about the iPad 9 generation that I have here, like this is the iPad 9 generation. I will talk about the iPad Air with the M1 chip. I will talk about the iPad mini, which is my favorite one, and I will talk about the iPad 10 and the M2 iPad Pros, which were released last week. So if you are excited for that, I will try to help you navigate these waters very safely. So do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The iPad 9 generation costs only $349, but it really packs a punch when you realize that it has the A13 chip, it has a 10.2-inch display, it still has an amazing support for the Apple Pencil, it still has tons of stuff going for it. It's a cheap iPad, yes, but it still gets the iPadOS 16 full feature set. It doesn't get Stage Manager, doesn't get monitor support. But for the iPad stuff that you actually use it, like picking up your first generation Apple Pencil, one of the best features of this iPad is the fact you can just click on the screen and take notes with this Apple Pencil, which for students is actually very useful, and for only $349 can be a very good replacement for your notebooks and books at school. It's better than a Chromebook. Of course, you can use the Apple Pencil. It's way more responsive. You have all of the apps available on the App Store and on the Apple ecosystem. And so why should you not get this iPad, and why should you spend more for the iPad 10 or even the iPad Air? Well, I don't see reason for you to spend the extra money for the iPad because this iPad can do every single thing that the iPad can do, the iPad 10, and does it while being cheaper. No, doesn't have the newer design. No, doesn't have the fun colors. But still has the same panel, which is a little bit shorter because the other one is 10.9-inch. This is 10.2. But in my opinion, it's a still very good panel, and both of the panels are not laminated, so they both suffer from the problems of a non-laminated screen. This is still an IPS panel, an LCD panel. The other one is just a scaled up version of this one. So in terms of displays, only the difference is in bezel size, not more than that. Then, of course, the design. This has the old iPad design, which I think it's very useful. It's very portable to grab on. It's very light and very actually beautiful to look at. I enjoy looking at this iPad. And of course, the iPad 10 generation features the new iPad Pro 2018 design generation. It's squared off, it cuts into your hands a little bit more, although I'm used to it because I use the 2018 iPad Pro. So, in terms of differences between these two iPads, it's only on the design. And after you realize that that's very superfluous stuff, the extra $100 that you are saving here that you can put towards your Apple Pencil if you don't have one, I think it's worth it. So, these both iPads come with 64 gigabytes of storage. If you want more, you will have to upgrade. In my opinion, if you want to use this as a student device, don't really upgrade. If you want to do like simple stuff like media consumption and just taking notes, 64 gigs is more than enough, while going for 256 might be a very expensive mistake. So look at this in a way that if you want a cheap iPad to take notes, then in my opinion, the iPad 9 generation is way better than the iPad 10 generation, just because it has the same feature set, it can do the same stuff. You cannot unlock more stuff by buying the iPad 10 generation. For that, you have to buy the iPad Air 5 with the M1 chip. So yeah, I do still think that this iPad is a very good deal. The only thing that I think imposes a threat to this iPad is the iPad mini. That iPad mini costs $100 more than this iPad, but on the contrary of the iPad 10, it features a laminated display, features the Apple Pencil 2 support, features the charging on the side that this iPad doesn't feature, features the new design from the iPad 2018 Pros, and of course, it features something that this iPad doesn't feature. Although it's close, it's not near enough. The iPad mini design. The iPad mini is mini for a reason. It's very small device with a big screen. it has a 9.3-inch display or around 9 inches display, while this one has a 10.2. So 1 inch of a difference for a big reduction in size. So the iPad 9 generation, although $100 cheaper, when comparison to the iPad mini, it kind of lacks some power because the iPad mini features the A15 chip. The iPad mini features so many cool stuff that this iPad doesn't. And at the end of the day, I think that the Apple Pencil 2 support with the new charging method, it's so much worth it, the $100 extra that you are paying, that at the end of the day, the only reason that I would go for the iPad 9 if you are a student right now would be the fact that you already had an Apple Pencil, the Apple Pencil 1 from your iPad 7 or the iPad 8, and you wanted a new iPad because your older one is kind of getting slow and broken. Then you don't want to buy any more Apple Pencils, so you just buy the iPad 9 generation. The iPad 10 though is kind of a stretch if you compare it to the iPad mini. At the end of the day, I think it's not the best reason to get it, and I don't think it's a good deal if you compare it to the iPad mini. But at the end of the day, the iPad 9 generation is a very cool iPad to get, and if you do enjoy it, then of course the iPad 9 generation should be for you. Then let's talk about who's the iPad 10 for and why should you buy it. The iPad 10 is that kind of iPad that I don't think is the iPad for you. The iPad 10, it's the older components of the iPad, so the A14 chip, non-laminated display, Apple Pencil first generation support, but they are all packed in the newer design, the iPad Air design. So I know it's weird. Yes, you have some new features like the landscape camera. You have also the new smart folio case or the magic folio case, whatever you want to call it. But those are just sprinkles on top of a very bad cake, because the iPad 10 has some weird stuff like non-laminated display and 64 gigabytes of entry price and first generation Apple Pencil support, because those three, in my opinion, are deal breakers for the extra $100. In my opinion, if you want to buy the iPad 10 generation, just buy the iPad mini. But if you do really need the extra screen real estate and you don't have really that much money, try to find an iPad Pro 2018 used. I know I promised in this video this would be buy only new iPad video, iPad guide, but only for new iPads. But I cannot recommend you buying the iPad 10. You have so much more iPads on option that the iPad 10 is such a bad deal when you compare it to the refurbished 2018 iPad Pros. I made a video on that, go check it out, on even the refurbished iPad Air 4. So, Jesus, so many better deals than the iPad 10. Do not buy the iPad 10. I don't think it's a very good deal. Let's talk about the iPad mini now. The iPad mini, it's a very cool product. I know it's a niche iPad. I know that Apple does not sell iPad minis a ton, but I do think that the iPad mini is a really cool device. It's small. It's very practical to use. I've used an iPad mini before. My father had an iPad mini 2 generation, so it was really small. And I thought that iPad was really cool. Now, I've used the iPad mini on the Apple Store. I think it was like 6 months ago or 5 months ago. It was cool. It was very comfortable to use. The experience with the Apple Pencil 2 support, which the iPad mini supports, was very useful. I do like that iPad, and I do think that that's the perfect iPad for students that just want to carry light stuff to school. And the iPad mini is really cool to do media consumption, Instagram, TikTok, and even YouTube. The iPad mini is the real iPad for me. Like, it's the real iPad experience that you can really use iPadOS to its fullest. Because when you go into a bigger screen like the iPad Air, you just realize, oh shoot, I should have just bought a laptop because this is expensive. This cannot do laptop stuff, and this is not a laptop replacement. But I will talk about the iPad Air and the iPad Pros later on in this video. Now let's focus on the iPad mini, which in my opinion has a bigger market than people actually think of. Because the iPad mini is good for students, the iPad mini is good for people in general that just want to do some media consumption. In my opinion, the iPad mini is just a perfect iPad. The price point is on point. $449 is just perfect in my opinion. And I do still think that the iPad mini is the best value iPad on the lineup. And that's why in this video, I want to recommend you more of the iPad mini. So if you want a real cheap iPad and you are looking, should I buy the iPad 9 generation, the one that I talked about before and I have here, should I buy this iPad or should I buy the iPad mini? In my honest opinion, I think you should buy the iPad mini. But let's now talk about the bigger brother of the iPad mini, the iPad Air. The iPad Air is a very strange product. In my opinion, Apple just released the iPad Air, the M1 iPad Air, has a step ladder to the iPad Pros. Because if you think about it, the iPad Air sits between the iPad mini and the iPad 10 generation and the M2 iPad Pros. The iPad Air with the M1 chip is weird. Think about it. It has the iPad Pro design, it has the iPad Pros chip, but it doesn't have the iPad Pros display, doesn't have the iPad Pros port, And at the end of the day, with 256 gigabytes of storage, is almost as the same price as the 11-inch iPad Pro with the M2 chip. Because if you think about it, that iPad Pro starts with 128 gigabytes of storage. And in my opinion, on an iPad, that's more than enough. While the 64 is kinda cutting it very close. So you will have to choose the 256 gigabytes on the iPad Air. When you do that, the price jumps to $700, which at that time, it's only $50 more to go for the iPad Pro. And then Apple upsells you on the iPad Pros. So yeah, the iPad Air, in my opinion, doesn't have much use other than people that just want a really cheap iPad, but with a big screen and a little bit better screen than the iPad 10 generation. But if you do want just a bigger iPad screen, then buy a refurbished 2018 iPad Pro again. I mean, if you reduce the iPad lineup to new devices, I can talk to you just to buy the 2018 iPad Pro instead. The only device that I can do that is on the iPad mini, because the iPad mini is just mini, it's just cool. You cannot find a small display and as powerful as that. While the 2018's iPad Pros with the 11-inch or even the 12.9-inch are just a replacement for the iPad 10, for the iPad Air, and for every other iPad. So yeah, be in doubt about that when buying a new iPad. Put in your mind that you can buy a very good and completely new refurbished iPad 12.9-inch from 2018, and this is an iPad Pro. So it has ProMotion, Apple Pencil 2 support, USB-C, and Stage Manager support on iPadOS 16. So yeah, the iPad Air is just a step ladder for the M2 iPad Pros, which strangely are probably the only iPads a part of the iPad mini that I can actually recommend you to buy in 2022. So let's talk about the iPad Pros and why I think this M2 upgrade was very small, but it starts to justify the upgrade over older iPad Pros. The iPad Pro with the M2 chip was released about 1 week ago, and since the reviews have been launched, the performance gains are actually very noticeable. It's 15% on CPU, 60% on GPU in some tasks. In real tasks are about 35% on GPU. But the real thing is, Apple announced that DaVinci Resolve will be bringing its software to the iPad Pros or even the iPad OS. So yeah, we are getting video editing pro software on the iPad. And now the M2 chip might be making the difference, because you have H.265 accelerators while the M1 did not, or even ProRes accelerators. So it starts to make more sense to go for the M2 chip. On top of that, you have the new feature that Apple software locked, which was the Apple Pencil hover support, and then you have the monitor support, Stage Manager support. You can get 16 gigabytes of RAM with the M2 chip with 2 terabytes of storage. So if you think that with the Stage Manager upgrade on the iPadOS 16, you can turn your M2 iPad Pro into a laptop replacement together with DaVinci Resolve software, then I think it's time for you to buy the M2 iPad Pro. I do recommend you going for the 12.9-inch iPad Pro with 1 terabyte of storage or at least more, because if you are working with very high-end footage like ProRes footage, you will fill up the iPad very fast. And iPad is not very fast transferring files from the Files app, so you have to take that in mind. So if you are excited to test and to use DaVinci Resolve, which I know I am on the iPad, then please Apple, please make Final Cut Pro for the iPad 2. So I'm excited for the future of the iPad Pro lineup. I'm excited to see if Apple can finally put effort into releasing new iPad Pros with more features and can turn iPadOS finally into its own machine, its own software. I don't want to see macOS on the iPad Pros. I think that's dull. I think that's stagnating progression. I think that the Mac software should be on Macs and the iPad software should be on iPads. I don't want to see macOS on iPadOS. I don't want to see that. I just want to see a new revamped iPadOS with some new way of interacting with the software, which should be based on touch. I want to see new Stage Manager-like features. I want to see a new Files app, which is better. I just want to see Apple takes on Final Cut Pro for iPad. I just want to see how Photoshop can deal with the Apple Pencil support in the future. I just want to see how Apple just turns Logic Pro into a machine that it's just incredible on the iPad. I want to see how Apple just turns the iPad into a real computer replacement, but not a real computer. I want to see Apple turn the iPad into the iPad that just takes the spotlight from the computer industry, but is still a tablet. So I want to see a new accessory, the new Magic Keyboard support. I want to see more from iPad Pro lineup. I want to see some Magic Keyboard Pro. I want to see some bigger iPads like a 16-inch iPad Pro with 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, with the M2 Max chip or the M2 Pro chip, software support. I don't want to see macOS, but the new softwares, new lock features like I don't know, a new stage manager with 16 apps open and completely resizable and retouchable windows. I want to see more of the iPad lineup. And if you ask me right now, should you buy the iPad Pro with the M2 chip? In some cases, I think you should. If you are waiting for some kind of release of software that can enable you to replace your Mac, if you like really to use the iPad, then yeah, buy the M2 iPad Pros if you have the money. If you don't have the money, then my recommendation is still the same. The 2018 iPad Pros refurbished are only $400, and if you are thinking, oh, those are too old, doesn't have the ultra-wide camera, then the M1 iPad Pros are also findable refurbished on Amazon for around $700, and the 2020 iPad Pros, the first generation with ultra-wide camera, are also available. If you ask me, I think that the M1 also is a very good deal. You have monitor support, you have the mini LED Pro Display XDR display on the iPad Pro. So yeah, at the end of the day, buying refurbished is actually a better deal than buying new. But still, if you want to buy new, if you want to buy the newest generation with new features and more years of support and more likability and probability to get even more pro features in the future, then the M2 iPad Pro should be for you. So let me know in the comments down below what you think about the iPad lineup in general and this buyer's guide that I made for you today. Let me know in the comments down below all of that. Which iPad should you buy? Which iPad did you buy? And which iPad do you have? Are you going to buy an iPad in the future, or you are foreshadowing its demise? Let me know all of that on the comments down below. Do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. This has been Tech Summer talking to you here. Bye.